All right, CNT120, Chapter 1 Lab. We're on the last section down here on Layer 7. Now, we just finished Layer 4, so don't panic. With Layer 7, what we find is typically the upper layers of the OSI model, 5, 6, and 7, tend to get lumped together. They're kind of hard to differentiate on a network when we're looking at traffic, so these tend to get lumped together. So we are actually going to look at layer 7 data, and that's proof of the 567 working on my network. And to do that, we're actually going to look at the actual data, the HTTP data that's moved from the server to the computer. And that'll be our proof of the layer 7, if you will. So I might need to open things up, or you might need to as well. I'm going to open up the sniffer, and then I'm going to open up my Philadelphia laptop. So I'm going to open up the sniffer over here, and I'm going to try to slide that over to the side. And I'll try to open my Philadelphia laptop as well. I'm going to try to get both of these windows up here. So let me do that. There we go. There's both windows up there. After I do that, I'm going to open the Philadelphia laptop, the browser, and I'm going to rebrowse to the CNT.org, and I'm going to look at my sniffer results. Now, just to make it clean for you, I'm actually going to, on my sniffer, I'm going to do a clear. That'll clear my previous capture out. I'm now going to, on my laptop, go to the browser, and I'm going to rebrowse to the CNT.org. So, open up browser, you can do it. And I'm going to do www.cnt.org. Now, when I click go here or enter, I'm going to watch my data over here. I saw DNS again. I see the TCP, I see HTTP data, and then TCP. So now that I have that, I'll leave this handy because I'll need this in a little bit. But what I'm seeing over here, again real quickly, DNS, when I first typed in cnt.org, that name has to get resolved into an IP address. So this actually got sent to the DNS server. Let me show you out here. This actually got sent to the DNS server. The DNS server responds with the IP address of that CNT.org server. In the DNS server, there's a table that says this name is this IP, this name is this IP, and so forth. So when CNT.org got sent, the DNS server responds with this is the IP you're looking for. And then the next thing that happens, you see TCP here. TCP gets used to, hey, web server, are you awake over there? Web server's like, yeah. He goes, can I get your web page? Okay. So the TCP that is there to like set this up, and then the actual web page transfer occurs. And then TCP is like, hey, thanks, man, appreciate it. Server's like, okay, see you later. So this TCP is setting up this communication session. We transfer the web page, and then it closes it down. That's what you're seeing in a real quick description over here, or real quick description on what you're seeing over here. So what we're going to do now, let's take a look at the HTTP message that we see. So let's look at HTTP here. I'm going to highlight that, and I'm just making my window a little larger. And look down through. We see the Ethernet header. That's my layer 2 header, source and destination MAC address. Things like switches are going to use that to get it to the right computer in the network, in that local network. IP header. There we go, there's IP header. We have source and destination IP address. 101, this is coming from a PC, 30.4, that's going to the web server. So this will be the HTTP request. Hey, server, can I have your website? So here is the IP header with source and destination IP. That gets used by things like routers to route this to the correct network. Continuing down through, TCP, source port coming from the browser of that device to 80. That is the port number for web traffic, HTTP traffic. So it's going to the web server port 80, and it'll respond to that. All of these fields in here are to number all of this information, get it in order, get it sent, and these are also there to make sure if something goes missing, I can reference it. Hey, I'm missing this chunk, and the server would resend it. I'm missing this chunk, and the server would resend it. And that's all due to TCP. All these fields are here to number everything and make sure it all gets there. I'm going to keep going. The last thing I have down here is my HTTP data. So this is the upper layer data as we went down through the data encapsulation layers, this was the data at the upper layers, and then the TCP header got added with the port numbers, then the IP header got added with the IP addressing, and then the Ethernet header got added with the MAC addressing. So here is that data encapsulation process. We're almost seeing it in reverse because it's coming off the network, and it tears this header off, prints it, tears this header off, prints it, tears this header off, prints it, and then prints the data inside. But here is that HTTP data. There's my layer 7, my TCP layer 4, my IP layer 3, my Ethernet layer 2. So there is actually my HTTP data. And if I were to look at the next HTTP chunk, you can do it. This you see is like, okay, you got the whole web page, close it down now. Okay, and that's what you're actually seeing right there. It's closing out that session, and then TCP is closing it out. You'll see down here with TCP, there's no more HTTP data. It's gone. Okay, so there's my HTTP showing all of those header fields along with the HTTP data. All right, so there is my data encapsulation process looking at layer 7 HTTP data with all the headers on the front of it. Now, before we go any further, let's copy I'm going to close my sniffer out. I'm going to open up my browser back again over here. Let's copy our web page here. I'm going to highlight all that. I'll do a right click. Right click may not work. I'll try to do a Control C. That's my shortcut for copy. So I'll try to do a Control C. I'm going to try to go to my notepad, and I'll say layer 7 results, and we'll say, contents of website, something like that. I'm going to try to paste it in. Oh, looks like that jumped over there, so we'll do, there it is, that's it. Welcome to the HTTP server, blah, blah, blah. Good enough. And that, I'm not worried about the formatting, losing color, anything like that. Just the data is fine because it has the contents of that website right there. I will save that text file before I get any further. So now I should have, and I have a review down here of what should be submitted. But before we get to that, I have a review here of your layers reminding you layer 1 was that physical link, that patch cables that we were dealing with. Layer 2 was the data link or our network card. We even had to install a network card into the Harrisburg PC. And then we looked at the address that was burnt into it, the MAC address. That's your layer 2. Layer 3 was our IP addressing. And we looked at the static and dynamic IP addressing. And we looked at the addresses assigned to machines, IP config, and then we even pinged. We sent a data packet between 2 nodes. Proof that our layer 3 link was working. Layer 4 is our transport layer, and we have things like TCP and UDP working there. TCP is there to number everything, label everything, make sure it reliably gets there. Now, before I leave that layer, because we have the sniffer handy, I'm going to open up my sniffer again. Let me show you real quickly. If I highlight one of these DNS chunks of data, if I look at its header, what I find is the Ethernet header, okay. IP header, okay. I see a UDP header now. UDP, as you see, is much smaller. That's the connectionless one. It's like, hey, just get it there. And then I see my DNS data. So this is actually layer 7. This UDP is layer 4. IP is layer 3. Ethernet is layer 2. So DNS is using this UDP instead of TCP. But there's my layers in that DNS chunk of data. So there's my layer 4, either using TCP or UDP. We mainly looked at TCP. I just showed you UDP there. That's a bonus for those of you who stuck around this long so far. And then my upper layer data, in this case, we were looking at HTTP. And I just showed you actually DNS there too for the bonus people that's sticking around. So there's a quick review of all of your layers, trying to make some semblance, some order of these layers that the book talks about, but in a working network, in a working environment. If you were to do the kind of thing we just did here in the lab room, your results are going to be almost identical. We might have some different numbers because of MAC addresses and everything, but your results are going to be pretty much identical. All right, before we close anything out, double check your text file and make sure you have what's listed here. I try to do that for all of our labs to make sure you have it all. We're going to look at the MAC address from the Harrisburg This was our Harrisburg PC. Right below that, we have the IP address from the Harrisburg laptop. We have the ping between the two. We have our TCP port numbers. Then we have the contents of our website. So I have all the pieces in my text file that I need. I'll make sure I save that, and that's going to get submitted to D2L. I'll show you that in just a second. I can close that out. I might want to save my packet tracer file in case I need to come back and revisit. I will close that out. Yep, I'll save it. I'll save it one last time. That's fine. There we go. And then in my folder here, I should see there's my text file and there's my packet tracer file. I'm going to, on D2L, I'll go to the Dropbox here, and let me do, like you guys see, I'll do the preview. I'll open up my Chapter 1 lab. I will scroll down here to add a file. And I'm going to browse for that Chapter 1 file, or I can drag it in here. If I want to do that, I can actually just drag the file from here in. That'll work. Or I can browse, I'll say upload, and I'll go to my documents folder, Chapter 1 lab, Chapter 1 lab online, and I'll grab that text file and say open. I'll say add, it'll be here. I can add other files if I need to. For this lab, we don't need to add any additional files. So the only thing I would need to do at this point is click submit. And you notice I don't need the packet tracer file. I'm just looking for the results file. If you want to keep the packet tracer file for yourself as backup, that would be wise. Same thing with your text file, that'd be wise as well. Just click submit when you're done, and your Chapter 1 lab will be done. I'm going to leave this page. I'm not going to submit the file to myself. I typically, towards the end of the week, when we're getting close to the due date, start grading the labs. So usually within like a day or two after the due date, I have your labs graded and back to you. I just kind of wait till we get close to the due date, so I'm not grading things before you guys are done submitting. Every now and then somebody's like, oh, no, here's the updated file. So I kind of wait close to the due date, grade them, but within a few days after the due date, you should have your lab back. So there's our Chapter 1 lab. Future labs will be done very similarly. Future labs in our class will be done very similarly.